and activate edge light. Hey guys, my name is Matt Workman, and today we are going to be breaking down the cinematography of The Martian. This is Cinematography Database Show, and this is where I like to take a minute, reflect back on a cool project, dig through the internet, really look for some cool behind the scenes, and then break it down and talk about what went into making it all in one place. The internet's really noisy. There's stuff everywhere. I try to bring it all together into 1 hour-ish long, which is long for YouTube, an hour-ish long breakdown of, again, a feature film commercial music video. And the reason I have this lamp here, and I started off this episode, let's turn it off for a second. You can see this lamp, this IKEA lamp. Go watch The Martian again. This lamp is all over The Martian. And I was in theaters watching it. Wait a minute. I don't actually go to the movie theaters that much anymore. Wait. I'm sorry. I think I was in this room watching it on iTunes or something like that. Oh no, you know what? I watched it on Apple TV. I'm gonna put it here. Give myself an edge light. It's a cool lamp. Like it rotates. The head rotates. So I can like lens flare. It's the lens flare episode. I was actually watching it with I watched it with my wife, actually, now that I remember. We watched it on iTunes, I'm pretty sure, on my Apple TV. And I remember, like, you know, watching the movie. I had a lot of fun watching it, but I remember seeing this lamp everywhere on Mars. They have this in the Mars station, and it's actually in the NASA place, and they painted this part black. I felt cool because I have 2 of these because I was trying to, like, design the lighting in my studio at one point. And I saw this at IKEA, and I was like, this is cool, so I bought it. So what I'm trying to say is that I have Ridley Scott style taste and lighting practicals. And practicals is something we're going to talk about in this video. Practicals are very important, especially moving forward for the type of cinematography that I think is going to be pretty big and pretty prevalent for the rest of the existence of cinematography. So let's get right into this breakdown. Okay, so here we are. Why can't I paint on this layer for some reason? Oh, this is why. Okay, so here we are, the cinematography of The Martian, shot by DP Dariusz Wolski and virtual production supervisor Casey Schatz. That's the first time we've put someone on here besides the DP. What's going on? So we'll get to that in a bit. Here is our slate. I'm going to put a layer over it. So we have Ridley Scott. Ridley Scott's probably my favorite director. Kind of historically, just from the films that he's made. I don't know can you say that if you like a movie that it's the director's work? Does that make sense? Like if I like a lot of movies, do I credit that all to the director? I guess I would, you know. Ridley Scott, I've just loved everything he's made. A lot of his movies are too scary for me to watch. Aliens, too scary. Prometheus, too scary, but they look great, and I love those kind of stories. I just can't watch scary movies. But so The Martian, less scary. I think that's what they were calling it. They're like the less scary Aliens or less scary Prometheus. So this one I could actually get through. And shot by Dariusz Wolski. Cool little color correction chip chart. I wonder how much the colorists or who's ever doing the dailies actually uses that thing. Not sure, with this like red light on it. But that's our slate picture. And we are going to move right into this shot. So this is from the trailer. And this is from an MPC breakdown. It's called MPC is Motion Picture Company. And they handled quite a bit of the visual effects on this film. And the other house that I'm going to be using their footage from, or their breakdown reels, are Framestore. Sorry, Framestore is the other VFX company. So this is Mars. And there's a lot of interesting things happening here. If I had to call it the horizon, I would say it's probably it's around here. Pretty even. This is when we find, so this is going to have a ton of spoilers in it. But if you haven't seen The Martian, I mean, come on. Even if there's spoilers, you should still go watch it if you've never seen it. So here is Mark Watney / Matt Damon, who has just been knocked the F out and like in a ridiculous dusty Mars storm. And he's like half buried in this red dirt. And he's on Mars. And this is what Mars looks like. So this was like a pretty cool version of Mars. And I believe they shot the wide plates, stuff like this. They shot it in Jordan, where I think that it kind of had this kind of like rock look already. And then as you'll see, some of this is real. A lot of this deeper stuff is going to be added in post. But still just a really beautiful palette going on here. So let's look at this again. Something that I talk about all the time on this show, and it's something that you need to really start to understand, is atmospheric perspective. And so what I want to just show really quickly is that in the front here, I'm going to grab this color, put it up here, contrasted with this color is pretty contrasty. But as we go into the background, so we'll take this color and the shadow color here, getting less contrasty, and then in the back, there's almost no contrast at all. This change from contrasty in the foreground to less contrasty in the background is called atmospheric perspective. It is one of the number one ways of making things look realistic. And if you're Ridley Scott, a lot of his movies force that with haze and rain, and you'll see a little bit more of that here. It's a great way in painting, in 3D, in real life to add, a cinematic look. I don't use the word cinematic lightly, but there are things that make a nice and engaging looking image. And one of those things is controlling your focus with contrast. And if we do this kind of gradation of contrast into the depth, that is a great way of creating interest within a frame. Other things are like reflections and some other things. I've got about 5 things, I would say, like 5 concepts that really it's kind of like a formula that like if you used all those things, that even if it was a terrible thing, like it just wasn't like a very great photograph or lighting, if you had those 5 elements, it would still be engaging. You'd still get like 500 likes on Instagram or something like that. So here is what the raw plate looks like. And this is fascinating to me, right? So it's like, this is the raw plate from Jordan. The sand, not red. The sky, not red. The mountains got replaced, but the bulk of it is there. And the reason I want to show this is because look how much is color correction and look how much is visual effects in this film. And the thing that I'm starting to notice, because I'm really trying to understand the difference between real world traditional live action filmmaking and virtual cinematography and color correction, like what is the line, who does what. I would say that the composition is the cinematographer, where the choosing horizon is a massive decision. It's something that I think cinematographers still choose correctly. Choosing the horizon and the camera height, although that seems like perhaps a small thing in the scale of your production day, is like, oh, how high is the camera in the air? It's actually a massive thing. And where is the person in relation to the horizon usually has a lot to do with the narrative of the story. Sometimes it's just purely composition, but a lot of the times it's a narrative device. And camera operators and directors like Ridley Scott, David Fincher, people who are very on top of the camera work, they're aware of this, hyper aware of it. But just look at the color correction and the VFX that's being done here, right? Pretty massive, but the guts of it are there. But the sand was turned red. They added a whole bunch of atmospheric perspective, added some CG mountains. I thought that was a cool way to start this off. So when they're in Jordan, pretty much natural light. You don't really need to fill in anymore. And day exteriors with digital, with film, you definitely didn't need to fill in. You could if you wanted to go like all Hollywood style, but a lot of it you just basically backlight. You always try to arrange the sun to be behind you or in front of you, so the sun's backlighting it. And that's what they're doing in a lot of these exteriors, or there's a lot of aerials. You try to pick an angle of the sun that like properly shows the shape of the mountains. That's a lot what's going on. Not a ton of lighting, a lot of passive mount stuff. For those of you who care, this is a Libra head. This is the stock isolation vibrator thing, shock mount. And then again, the circle head is the Libra. I have a nice model of this in Maya. I am making it for Cinema 4D now. It's going to be even better. And we see here that they shot with 2 Red Epic Dragons in 5K. I don't think 6K was out. And 8K was definitely not out. 8K is still not out as of recording this. So there's 2 Red Epics in a 3-reality rig. I actually didn't even watch this in stereo, and I really enjoyed it. I don't really love stereo as a viewer because I wear glasses, and then I have to put other glasses over my glasses. Just I don't like that. This is these blue handles or extensions here. There's an extension for the Libra. The Libra is not usually this drop down, the pan part. And it does change the way that this rotates the camera. But because this rig is so gigantic, they had to use the blue drop downs. Thanks, Monster Remotes, for teaching me about the Libra head. I'm going to be hanging out with them a bunch in the future. Here's another Libra. Something that's really cool about this film, and they talk about how tight the schedule was, is that there's almost 3 cameras, or at least 2 cameras, and if you count the GoPros, like 10 cameras, but 3 motion picture cameras almost always rolling on these scenes, and they're getting really effective angles, I think, in 3 different places. Now, what are these filters? 1/4 WR. I am so off my filter game. I have no idea what that is. An IRND. I know what that is. And this is the 28 to something lens, maybe? I don't know. But there's a really cool use of multiple camera angles. And if you want to learn about multiple camera angles, wait till this tea break. There's going to be a really cool way for you to start to practice coming up with good coverage without being on set. This is stuff that you can plan on your own. Again, in Jordan, this is a behind the scenes photo, but the horizon's up here. If you're doing these kind of breakdowns on your own, which I've seen people start to do more of these breakdowns, not that I invented this format, but I've seen people start to do this even more, which I think is great. You should be definitely doing this on your own, to the point where, like, you don't even have to watch this show anymore. You do your own breakdowns. That would be, I'd be very happy if people started to do that. Here's a gigantic O'Connor 120 X head, I think is what it's called. Big 3-reality rig. De facto, I'm a filmmaker in the desert hat, and Mark Watney stuck in the sand. Just a cool photo. Not a lot to break down here, but a lot of natural light. There's no fill. They're not trying to blow this up with like 100K soft suns or anything like that. Just put the sun in the right place, and the Red cameras and the Alexas these days, they do a good job of capturing it. And then a lot of it's color correction and visual effects. So here's some real Ridley Scott looking lighting here. This helmet, for a couple of reasons, and I'll draw them out for you right here. So this helmet, first of all, this is like the Prometheus helmet with the LEDs inside, and they're warm. Kind of like this LED over here. Kind of looks like that, actually. And then we have these LED style headlights, and you can see the beams coming off of them, just so cool. And then they're like side lit in the helmet. It's beautiful. And what we have is this very painterly, I said painterly really oddly there, this painterly beam of light, which is kind of like a searchlight going around, / maybe just like a big searchlight. And it's this really natural vignette. So he is silhouetted against a beam of light. And then there are some very bright point sources that keep this from feeling too dark. If you listen to all the things I just mentioned, silhouetting against a beam of light, bright 100% IRE, essentially full white light sources, and vignette, those are part of the concepts that I was talking about before. I'm going to have to come up with this, like the 5 concepts of cinematography that I think are really strong, like undeniably human. People love them. It's kind of how the human brain works. You can tap into how the brain reads images quickly. Ridley Scott knows how to do that. And this is one of my favorite scenes, and I love this type of lighting. And I've seen concept artists and painters, go to town on recreating these. There's a whole community of people that take frames like from movies, and then they paint them to truly understand the palette that's going on. I think it's a fun exercise. I've done a lot of it myself, actually. So again, here's more LEDs. It's like warm. So we have warm LEDs versus these cooler LEDs out here. So color contrast, again, kind of playing the silhouette shape. Humans like circles too. Silhouette shape against a beam of light. And I'm not going to show clips. Someone was angry that I wasn't showing clips, and I just can't show clips, guys. YouTube does bad stuff, and then people in like Canada or like Europe can't watch it. That's not cool. Go watch the trailer, go watch the movie. That's all I got to say. I'm sorry. But there are cases where I wish I could show clips. I wish I could show this one because it shows something about off-center framing, where they're framing like, if we break this like this, she's here, and then they keep trying to bring her back to the third because you'd want to bring her eyeline up here in a lot of the cases for like standard traditional composition. But what's really engaging, and editors will talk to you about this a little bit more in your cinematography, like here goes a little tangent. So when I've shot fashion before, it's like a lot of the times the directors ask you to just give it some life in the operating. So you just start like moving the camera around, and when you first start, you don't really know what you're doing. You're kind of just emulating kind of roughly what you've seen. And it's funny, in the edit, you'll see that like it's the weird composition. It'll start in a weird composition, like off center or off balanced, and then it rebalances and then it leaves again. That's an edit point for people. So you'll see that kind of stuff in this scene where it's you have you have your composition that you want to hold, but you're fighting it, and you're making the audience find it with you. The camera has to keep finding it. I don't know if that's helpful for you guys, but that's something I notice a lot now. And I am trying to write like a guide or like some sort of course now that I can really show camera work in 3D that explains a lot of these operating concepts and composition concepts in motion. This is not just still photography. There's 4 dimensions with time. How do you actually dance the camera? That's something I'm trying to work on in the future. I think there's a lot to be talked about there. Okay, so there's not too many left in this, so just some more cool warm LEDs, cold LEDs. This is so cool. It's pretty much like sometimes the only light source in the scene, and then we see them reflected in shiny objects, and we get all this free illumination from this and all these particles. I 100% thought this stuff was CG, but it turns out that they shot it like this. So this is like a Ridley Scott set. You better be coming with your dirt mask, your gas mask, and your protection. This guy's still trying to take production stills, baller. Cinetape readout. Here's our first AC pull in focus. Libra getting destroyed. Super Techno 50. We'll look at a Super Techno 50 in 3D in a bit. Super Techno 50 and the Libra head, pretty much the hero of this movie. And yeah, just a big light source up here. Could be like a maxi brute. Feels like pretty singular source. I don't know what all this atmosphere is, but you get it. This is like atmospheric perspective to the extreme, and just look how cool this is. I mean, that has a big effect on me. I mean, I'm probably going to try to take projects where I can try to recreate that for fun, or I'll just do it on my YouTube channel, because that's the only thing I really have creative control over as a DP. I am not a director, and this is just a really cool shot of the Libra head operator. I can tell because these are Libra head readouts. And this is a very clean red OSD on-screen display. So the red can put out a bunch of different things, but you'll see that he doesn't see like the interface and all that stuff. He's got his composition lines. So they're shooting 5K. That's what this outside line is, like this. But they're framing for a 240 4K extract, more or less, I would guess. And here's the red clip number. I don't know why the Libra head operator would need to know that. Pretty cool. Covered in visqueen or plastic so that this monitor doesn't get blown up. Just know that when people make equipment for the film industry, it has to survive this type of treatment. So why is film equipment heavy? Why is it expensive? You're like, oh, I love the FS7 and I love all those cameras that are at that level, but it's like, at the end of the day, you need to survive that shoot. Hardcore professional film equipment is heavy, and honestly, it takes a lot of its industrial design principles from the military, where you would have to have like your gun or your backpack or your food or your clothing survive a situation like this. Filmmakers, in a lot of ways, have to deal with the same thing. I'm not saying that it's like being at war, but the equipment needs to go through quite a bit of torture. So before our tea break, we've got quite a bit to blast through, but I'm going to break down. We're moving from some of the traditional cinematography to some of the virtual cinematography. Moving forward, I am not really going to focus on past films. I'm really going to do very modern films, and it's hard to do modern films without really talking about virtual production. Though I'm sure I will be picking on some films that don't have as much going on, if there's one that I think is cool enough to do that with. So here we are. Clearly they didn't shoot this in Mars, okay? This is from Framestore, the visual effects company. Check out Framestore. And of course, I took this from the Variety video breakdown, which is really cool, where they interviewed the VFX supervisor and the virtual production supervisor, who I'm going to be talking about. So they didn't shoot this in Mars. So how do we shoot this stuff in the real world? Clearly this is big picture of the Mars is post, and let's look at some of the let's break it down. So what did I just do? My bad. So here we are. Here's the actual plate. So this is what you actually shot on stage, right? So what is real here? What have we truly done? What we've done is we've picked the horizon, which I can't tell where it is. I think is this the horizon here? Like this? I think that's the horizon. So they're above the horizon, so we're looking up. We see a camera operator here on Chapman with a 3reality rig on truss. We'll see a lot of this. And then we have a camera down here with a slightly canted angle with a roll. The camera got rolled, so the horizon's not straight. It's a little bit diagonal. And we've chosen where the light's coming from. The light's coming from here. And we have this blocking, which is the relationship of the camera to the talent or the objects you're filming. And we see that they had to light up this green screen back here. And they chose the composition because this person's actually, what's it called? He's actually touching the object. It makes a lot of sense to have that, even though in Gravity they definitely didn't do that. So here is a good look at what goes into actually shooting this kind of stuff. And now, who is the person that plans what's going to be real and what's going to be fake? How much green screen do you need? Where the cameras are going to go? How this system that's controlling him speaks to the system that's controlling that speaks to the camera. Who is in charge of that? It is not the DP. It is not the director of photography. It is someone called the virtual production supervisor. Now that name, I think, is going to be in flux. It's not exactly always his responsibility. Sometimes it's the visual effects supervisor, the special effects supervisor. But on this particular movie, Casey Schatz here, who he and I need to catch up. I have not met Casey in real life, but I work with some people that work very close with him. Casey is from the third floor, and I'm going to probably have to do a entire video pretty soon about the third floor and Halon and how it got started. And their previs company, professional previs feature film company, and what Casey comes on to do is he takes the cartoons that are basically like the framing that Ridley wants and the pacing and that sort of thing, and he comes in and he says, okay, here's how we do it in real life. You wanted him to be flying around on a space station. Here's how we actually have to shoot it. He has to turn it into something that's real world, and virtual production is about that. In a way, I don't know how much I like the title virtual production supervisor, but so here is a cool shot. I think I did this backwards for some reason, but here's a shot of Mark where he's flying through space, and you'll see that there's this like kind of spider cam system that helps fly him around, and we'll see a couple different angles here, a couple different cameras capturing this all at once, which is bananas to me. What we have here is a techno dolly. There is so much to get through in this, and this techno dolly is of essentially a motor. Oh, I'm sorry. Is this the techno dolly? I can't tell. It says super techno. I feel like this is a techno dolly. It might be, I'm pretty sure this is a techno dolly. I'm sorry for that. Just wanted to make sure this is right. A techno dolly is a techno crane where every axis is programmable. So no actual physical person is programming it. You basically tell it, go to here, okay, and then 10 seconds later, go to there, and it does it for you. And it allows you to plan virtually, first of all, and have a very accurate on-set recreation of that. And it also just allows you to make sure that you don't kill someone with the camera. Because this thing's flying forward, this is flying towards him. You want to make sure that this robot's accurate, and when you throw human error into that loop, things can go wrong. So that's where you start to do stuff with robots. And over here is a Super Techno 50 with the Libra. So how do you plan this type of shooting? You don't wing it, trust me. This stuff does not get wanged it. It's probably not any of those things. I should edit that out. We're going to talk about how you actually plan for shoots like this, especially when you have such a short planning time. So this frame should have come first, but here is Matt Damon flying through space, the Super Techno grabbing his close-up here, and then someone else grabbing probably a wider shot, and then you'll see the Techno dolly comes and boom, flies in. So how do we plan this kind of shoot? This is what Casey Schatz is responsible for. So he builds the sets in 3D. You see these truss rigs. Here is essentially how the actor is strung up, and you'll see that most likely he flies back and forth on this truss, and we'll see a very accurate, I don't know if very accurate's the word. I actually have this exact 3D model from Technocrane SRO gave me this model, and I'm going to build a much nicer looking one, though this one functions fine clearly. They use a virtual version of the crane and the entire set to plan how fast things should be moving. Can the camera fit in this container? Should we take this part of the set off? Someone has to be responsible and be the adult at the end of the day, and it's the virtual production supervisor in this case. They even put the stunt pads down. They're planning everything virtually on the set so that you don't make big money mistakes on big money shoots. And very soon on the break, we're going to be talking about how you can save big money problems on small shoots, and that you'll be able to do this kind of work. At this point in time, on a movie like this, they had to bring in a specialist, not even from the main previous company, Argon. They had to come in from the third floor, who are the people that I learned TechViz. This is called TechViz for the VFX people. I call it Cinedesign because DPs are going to be doing it. We'll talk about that. I learned this from the third floor, and watching them work and being on some of those sets and just kind of hacking my way through it. I believe that I can work at a similar level as Casey, not the exact level, and these are much bigger productions, and that you'll be able to. You'll be able to do this type of planning as well for your shoot. Now, your shoot may not be this insane, but every shoot will benefit if someone on the team, especially the DP, can be responsible and be the person that's doing this type of planning. And it looks intimidating, but I've actually made it pretty easy, I think, for you guys. So let's look at some more of the planning that Casey does. So there's a lot going on here. So here's the Techno Dolly. Again, built to scale. This track is to scale, so you know how much track you need. We see these little things that cover the Kino flows that are lighting the ceiling. My 3D models of Kino flows look exactly the same. So this allows you to light the screen from below and the top, but you don't see the Kino flows. Really helpful. Here's a flag to cast a shadow, and you will see that there's an 18K on a crane, and this 18K is booming to represent where the sun is, because Matt Damon's in here spinning around, and then he basically plans where the light's going to be. He plans where the camera's going to be and how it's going to move using the Techno Dolly rig, and then because he's calling this out, he's basically deciding how to light it. So Casey is designing the lighting on this scene. You'll see it from above. This is the perspective view, and as I'm just going to click through a couple of these frames, I'll just do one more. We'll see that the light ends up behind this flag that casts a shadow accurately. And this is the view of what the final previs kind of looked like. And here's an above view. So this looks a bit intimidating, but I'm going to show you how actually reasonable this process is. To do it from scratch, like I did 4 or 5 years ago, that was hard. You can't go to any school and learn this. There's no school in the world that will teach you this. Maybe GCI, Global Cinematography Institute, shout out Yuri, and GCI. They're the only ones that could possibly teach this to you other than me. So it seems intimidating, and it seems like a lot of technical stuff that you're not used to doing, but you start to get on certain shoots, and I'll show you a really basic example. It's actually really easy, and it makes the shoot so much better when you do this, I think. I feel so much better on my shoots when I'm doing this kind of stuff. So here's the last frame I want to talk about before we go to our break. This is a bit advanced, but no one's really teaching cinematographers this type of work, so I want to be the one to help show you guys kind of like how big movies are made like this. Now, if you want to just go do indie live action movies and you just want to keep it like, hold it down and do the traditional cinematography thing only, I'm with that. Do that. Please do that. That's awesome. And there's a lot of places that teach traditional cinematography, but there are very few places that teach about previs, or what I call Cinedesign, if the DP is doing it, virtual production that shows this kind of stuff and tries to explain why you were doing this stuff. So no one likes being on this set. This set sucks. No one likes being on an all green set. Actors hate it. DPs really hate it. Ridley Scott hates being on set with its green screens like this. So what they've done for stuff like this is that you'll see the live action plate here. And you want to be able to, like I said before in the beginning, what is the DP doing? What is the director doing on a virtual set like this or a hybrid set? They're picking the angle. The angle is so important. That is directing. That is cinematography, and the lighting, of course, too. But how are you supposed to frame up if you don't know what's over here? They talk about this in the breakdown. If you dolly over just a little bit, you see all the way down the virtual set, or what would be there. So how do we see on set what we're going to get in 3D? That's called virtual production. And there's some lighting stuff here to talk about. That honestly, lighting on sets like this, it's very straightforward. I'll do like an entire guide on it on how to light for this type of set, it's not that difficult. I mean, you have to know a lot about cinematography, but overall, it's not very. I don't think it's that difficult compared to some other things. What you basically do is you model the 3D set first. And don't worry, DPs, you're never the one that's going to be modeling this. If you're on a shoot like this, the VFX company is going to send this to you, and you could possibly be the one who's going to help set this kind of stuff up. What they do is they align the real world set with the virtual set, which is this in perspective. And basically when you move your camera, like, so you can be framing up on this set and you're just like, I want to see what's over there. Let's see here. Let's go up. Let's go down. When you do that, when you move the camera, this set tracks with you. So if the camera moved over, this would stick to it and it would act like it was there. So when we're doing set extensions, when there's virtual characters, on set with virtual production, you can actually see the virtual set and the live set together. And I've done a couple shoots like that, and it is absolutely Jetsons shit. That's what I'm starting to call this. It's just like I'm in the Jetsons. I'm looking at like this virtual set and a real set at the same time. That's virtual production. The system I was working with is called Prevision Lightcraft. Go check them out. Shout out to the Prevision guys. Thank you so much for helping me train up on that. And they were using on this, and Digital Domain likes to use Simulcam is one of the solutions. And you use Maya and Motion Builder and a lot of other things. And if you're interested in that high level of, I consider cinematography, I consider this my soup. This is stuff that I worry about on set. I want to know what's going on here. I want to be lighting all of this. I want to know the process. If you're interested in being responsible for that much of the image making chain, it's something that Yuri Naiman calls expanded cinematography, and the person that's responsible for the entire chain of the image, he's calling a image director of imaging. Sorry for the brain fart there. Yuri calls that an director of imaging, which is beyond a cinematographer. It's this hybrid of cinematographer, visual effects artist, and previs artist, and virtual production artist all together. I had previously called it a full stack cinematographer, but Yuri and I had like a 2-hour long conversation between this and the last video, and I think I'm on board with director of imaging. So check out Global Cinematography Institute. Expanded cinematography is cinematography that encompasses all of this new stuff. And director of imaging is the person that's doing that. And there's already people doing this, guys. You look at this and it's like, this is Jetsons future stuff. There are people already doing this. People who are wanting to be a director of imaging. They want to be this new position. I want to be this new position too. And I'm going to help the next generation get to this point because there's quite a bit of stuff to get to before you can handle all of this together. But I'm at least exposing to you that right now. So we're going to take our break. But when I get back, we're going to talk about some more practical sets, some more practical cinematography, and we're going to break down frames like this, which is gorgeous. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the 5 concepts of what makes a cinematic image. I know cinematic is kind of like it's like, oh, it's like clickbait or something like that, but like I really mean it though, and I think this is really going to help you guys if you're painting, doing 3D, trying to look for things that are cinematic. What are those things? It doesn't require any money. It just takes a trained eye and a mind to be able to understand and find those things in the real world and just pointing your camera towards those things. So we are going to switch here and we're going to take our tea break. So today, was it last episode I didn't have my tea? I forget. Okay. So here we are in a program called Cinema 4D. It's just like Maya, just a little bit easier to use. And this is where Cinedesigner lives. The program that I'm releasing April 4th. I forgot the date. It's being released April 4th, the first version, and it's going to allow you to do virtual planning like you saw on that behind the scenes, but for your shoot. I don't care if you're shooting a commercial on a 4x4 set of a deck of cards or something like that. This process is going to help you in that. No matter how simple your shoot is, Cinedesign is going to help your shoots be better. And if you're a student interested in learning cinematography, you are also going to be able to practice and do fun things and explore cinematography in 3D without the need of having any real sets. And it does relate back to the real world. So let's look at Cinedesigner really quickly. I'm going to do a quick live demo of it. Here we launch it. This is the plugin. It might look a little bit different on the launch day, but it's getting close. We see we have a camera truck, a lighting truck, a grip truck, and a location. Location manager here. I'm going to add more locations, but I just wanted to have some stuff in here for you. So you click that one button, and here we are on a 40-foot cyc wall with one demo character. And this character, you can actually make him right here. It's part of Cinema 4D, so that's kind of nice. They give you this little character. If you're not digging the character, I'll show you how to get realistic, very realistic human characters so you can actually look at lighting on people's faces. Cinema 4D, free characters all over the place, really easy. So I'm going to do a quick demo. Let's do a little bit of that. Cinedesign tech viz that they were doing on the Martian, but we're going to do it for ourselves right here. Let me show you how easy it is to bring a Technocrane in. Ready? Technocrane. I clicked a button called Technocrane, and there is a Technocrane. Right? So this is the Super Techno 30. It's modeled after, and I'm actually going to turn off the lights for now. And then what we can do is we can actually look through it. So I'm taking you through the steps right now. It might look a little bit clicky, a little bit overwhelming for you if you've never done 3D, but this is not that bad. And I'm going to be doing essentially free online training on how to do cinematography design like this. Or exactly this. How to use my plugin Cinedesigner for Cinema 4D, how to plan cinematography for it, how do you plan real shoots, how do you learn real world cinematography in the computer. You're looking at it. So let's move this whole crane back. And you can see it's reflected in the right view here. That's your viewfinder. I'm going to make this window a little bit smaller and those windows a little bit bigger. So to start, you can move this whole thing around, okay? But Super Techno 30 is a big camera. And you'll see here when I select it, there's some controls over on this side, and I can change things like the focal length. So there's a 50, 75, very accurate. Let's put it back to a 25. I like 25 for Technocrane shoots. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to the resolution of a real HD frame, so 1920 by 1080. Now we're looking at a 16 by 9 image. So let's look at the controls that you can do on this camera. So here is what's called the Z head. This is the head that Technocrane makes, and it's on most, medium-sized Technocrane shoots. I will have a Libra, I'll have the stabilized Scorpio heads, but Z head makes sense for here. So what we can do is we can pan this back and forth, right? This is not going to be any more difficult than working on set. If you've never been on set, there's things to learn here, but this is panning the camera back and forth, the remote head anyway. Here's tilting. And these are the only controls you're ever going to really need to deal with. You don't have to worry about like all this like more advanced 3D modeling and 3D stuff. You don't really have to worry about that because I've built this tool set for you. All you have to worry about is like, can you pan and tilt the camera and frame up? I think you can. This stuff is all to scale, and it's going to relate back to your real world. Now, not everyone has a Super Techno 50, but I've built tripods and Fisher dollies and other things like that that are more attainable for most people. Here is panning the whole arm of the crane, tilting up and down. This is built to scale, built to specification, just like Casey builds his for the Martian. I build mine for you guys and for myself. Here's extending the arm out, so let me go to the side view. This is pretty money to be able to know how far, we killed our talent, how far the Technocranes actually boom out. That's the full length there. So we can do things like go up in the air, extend out, and then we can tilt down. And you can start to really look at what the cinematography is going to look like. And we can actually program a move really quickly. Key, 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 key. I'm going to be teaching you guys how to do this stuff, though it's really not, it's not that difficult, especially if you're using my controls. So we're going to bring the arm back in. I'm going to tilt down on the arm, and I'm going to tilt back up on the camera. Then you click these little buttons here. Clicking buttons. And this should work now. So that's the view of the camera move. It's not the best camera move in the world, but you can make it better. And here's the behind the scenes of it. So welcome to the world of Cinedesign. It's actually not that difficult. I've programmed this to work like a real world Technocrane. Not that scary. It's a lot less scary than working in pure raw 3D. This is more like working on set, and that's been the goal. And to end this demo, let me show you some really fun, cool lighting stuff. I've got some space lights. There's going to be, eventually, I'm going to build every single light in the film industry, and I mean this, every single light I'm going to put in here, and you're going to have an accurate representation of it. Right now, I've only got a couple things. But let's do something real fun to get at to finish this up. Let's put a breezy, which is a big umbrella light. Most people can't afford it. Even I struggle to afford it on my shoots. Well, you know what, guys? I've got a virtual one right here that's almost as fun to use. So this is an umbrella light. It's a beauty light. They actually used it on Part of Gravity because it's circular, kind of think like the sun. They liked how it looked. And it's on a stand, and everything works like the real world version. The only thing that you have to do is move it around and then play with these little controls that I've made very intuitive. It's called stand height, and you make the height go up and down. And it actually is the right height of a 3-riser baby stand. So really not that difficult, not that scary at all, I hope. Hopefully I'm showing that this is pretty easy. You grab the light itself, and it has controls as well, just like the camera. You pan, you tilt. And it's actually going to pan and tilt the way that you actually do it in real life. Try to make this all very realistic. So if I turn the lighting back on, I'm actually going to turn off my overhead light so we can look at just this light here. So what we have to do is turn up the intensity. And this is actually going to emit like light very similarly to the real world breezy. And I've got lots of lights in here. And they all act pretty realistically. So let's do a quick render. Now rendering and lighting in 3D is as scary as hard. I brought in the breezy with my program, and you literally hit Apple R. And it doesn't do anything. Let me try that again. Here we go. So we'll actually sit through a real-time render. This is probably a little bit boring. I usually speed these up for my demos, but I want to show you I'm running a MacBook Pro with like the NVIDIA card in it, so it's not a supercomputer. And this is how fast it renders. Now, if you've never done 3D, you're like, this is taking so long. If you've done 3D ever, this is pretty fast. It's a pretty fast render. You know, you just wait like a minute, and you'll see that the shadow quality very realistic. The simulation that's going on is basically a two-dimensional disc light that's the exact size as the breezy, and it's going to emit light in a very similar way with the shadow and everything. And what I'm going to do now to wrap this up, I don't want to stay here too long. Let's go back to perspective here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change this back into just no lighting. And what I just want to show you here is that like I've built out all the grip stands, and there's a couple other cool things like goalposts, and I'm going to build all the lighting stands, condors, every way that you normally put a light somewhere on set. I'm going to have that here so you can plan it and have it be realistic. And you're never going to have to 3D model anything like this. All you have to do is move things around and click a little slider that has the controls on it. So much easier than the real world, I'll say that much. And what's cool is that this stuff is very modular, which means that like this stand is separate from the breezy. So I can just get rid of the stand and I have a breezy. And I'll actually turn the lighting back on. And what I can do, and this is the power of Cinema 4D, you actually can't even do this in Maya, the program that Casey uses, is I can duplicate this light. So now I've got two breezes, right? So let's spin it around. And I'm going to make you kind of like a backlight. So what we're going to do now is, if you guys watched my Justin Bieber breakdown video with Josh, I'll show you how to do that right here, right now. So let's pan you this way, tilt down. I'm going to tilt the umbrella down like this, so it's a backlight. And what you can do here very quickly is gel the lights, more or less. Gelling is not quite the right word, but you know. So we can change the color. So now that one's red. And I'm going to change this breezy. And this breezy, what was it? It was green, right? It was green in the Justin Bieber video. It was kind of like a bluish green, like this, right? Like, what kind of green was it? I'm going to get it. I'm going to get this color green. Something like that. More bluish. Something like this. So you'll see that we have two breezes now, and gelling breezes doesn't make a ton of sense. Your key grip is gonna literally murder you if you keep asking him to gel breezes. They're not the easiest things to gel. But for visualization's sake, this breezy could be a chimera. I have all the chimeras in here. And it's just a quick way of looking at like, well, what would it look like if I keyed with green and backlit with red and did a 50-foot technocrane move? I've got Fisher dollies, I've got a couple things, and this is all going to be available to you guys, to the public, April 4th. I hope I've accurately illustrated how easy this is. And if you're like me, how incredibly fun this is. I just sit here all day and I make lighting setups. And then for me, I am developing the software, so I go in 3D model and I do some development. So if you guys ever wondered beyond being a DP myself, why do I know so much about equipment? It's because I'm building it in virtual. I need to know why people use it. I need to know the controls they use. And I'm basically simplifying the process incredibly for you guys to be able to do this yourself. So if you've ever wanted to do virtual lighting, to plan your shoot, to try some experiments, this is the way to do it. I've spent a long time developing this and doing my research and learning from people like Casey, learning from the people that do the planning for the real shoots. I'm building a system that's arguably as powerful and making it available to consumers. Now, stuff like this does exist, like you've seen, but you'll never get it. And if you did have to pay for it, there actually are some solutions. You're talking in the world of many thousands of dollars, like $20,000 for this kind of stuff. I'm not going to announce the pricing on this video, but you'll see it's way more affordable. Cinema 4D, a fairly affordable program. You need Cinema 4D to run this. This is a plugin. Cinedesigner is a plugin for Cinema 4D. But if you get Cinema 4D, even the most basic version, and you get my plugin, you're going to be able to do this type of lighting simulation, which is for planning, for learning, for teaching. I think the uses for this are endless. And you have my word at this point that I am dedicated to building everything in the film industry. So if I'm missing a Cardellini clamp, I'm literally modeling clamps. If I'm missing some crane that's made in Australia that I don't know about, if they send me the CADs, I'll build it and I'll make it available for you guys so that you can plan it. It's literally a virtual playground in here of real world lights. Let's just get up close with this umbrella light to exit out of this. Tea time break. Oh man. I don't know if this does anything for anybody else, but this is cool to me. And I'm just, I lied. We're going to go look at my Super Techno 30. It's actually not the most realistic. I can make this even more realistic. And I might be teaming up with Monster Remotes in New York to get up close and personal with some more cranes. But I like how this is looking and I like how this turned out. This has been about 5 years now of work to get a system like this running. Not necessarily the Cinema 4D one. I have this from Maya too, but that's kind of only for a select group of people that get to use that. But the Cinema 4D version, I will promise to you right now that anybody can learn Cinema 4D. I'm going to teach it to you online for free. As soon as it comes out, I'm going to be doing non-stop videos on how to do this, how to plan real shoots, and you'll be able to learn cinematography. Like I break down in these videos, you'll be able to learn it here and follow along virtually. Who else is doing that? I don't know. I think you guys should be excited for this. It's something that I've been wanting to be able to do for so long. And I've finally found all the pieces. Now, if you want to build sets and you want to get people and all these other things, you're like, where do I get all this stuff? I can't 3D model. There's a gigantic free library, I promise you, where you'll be able to get any 3D model of a car you want. Kitchens, real world furniture, that stuff. You just download it for free, you put it in there, and you light it up, and you plan with it. It's a beautiful world that we're about to get into. So that's Cinedesigner. And that's my first live demo of it. I think it's the first live demo publicly. I've been dropping a lot of demo videos for me testing it. But that's how easy it is to use. And, there are some other things that try to be like this, but they're not that easy to use and they're not that powerful. So that's Cinedesigner. Just going to drink a tea real quick. If you've ever talked for this long, because I don't break this video up, I just pretty much talk for 40 minutes, your throat gets kind of dry. So this tea break is actually like really necessary. Woo. Okay. So guys, that's Cinedesigner. Hope you're psyched. April 4th. Gonna be teaching it online. Be the first. Get in early because this is gonna start moving really quick. And if you want to get ahead of the curve, look up something called Octane. If you thought that demo was cool, we are going to be flying. You're going to be looking at this stuff and it's going to look like you're on set. It's going to look like this while you're doing it. And there's a lot of power for pitching clients, planning shoots, teaching. There's a lot of stuff that's going to be happening with it soon. So get in early, get involved. So here we are on a set. So what are the 5 things about cinematography that I could say about this scene? I think 5, I actually just made that up when I started talking here about the number, but the things that I look for in a cinematic image, those concepts, I'm starting to see them so much, I'm starting to really get an understanding. So let's start with the first thing. The first thing is that the lighting wants to be coming from deep in the background towards the camera. So backlighting, essentially. That is going to get you a lot of this. And what happens when you do that? So here's a bunch of scoop lights. essentially lighting the scene, though I think there's probably a light up here too, out of frame. So the light source is back there, and the light is coming back towards us. And what does that give us? That puts, and there's no light here. What that does is that puts our people in silhouette. And silhouette is something that's very strong for humans. Humans have developed the ability to see and identify things from silhouette, from survival, from being a hunter, from being able to see danger in the distance against the sun, against the sky, and recognizing instantly, is that a bear coming towards me and I need to run? Or is that my food? I need to go get it. Silhouette is something that you can use to tap into the human psyche. It's evolution. You can't fight it. Humans love silhouette. Our brains are just instantly drawn to it to identify what it is. Silhouette happens when you backlight or when you put something dark against something light. But backlighting a lot of the times will give you silhouette. Silhouette's very strong. So the first one is silhouette. I literally didn't plan this. I'm making this up right now. Though these elements are things that I see all the time and I think about constantly. I've just never put it together. So we're going to say silhouette. And we're going to say backlight. So the next thing that I would say is that because this is a contrasty scene, this is pure black. And it's scary to do that, right? But what's happening is that, like I said, when you have a very dark scene, as long as you have practicals, things that are very, very bright, your brain is okay with this. So the next thing is practicals that are bright. And what else is going on here? I would say is reflections. Reflections on the floor. So this is a reflection of that, of this opening more or less, and it's blurry. So we're going to put reflections here. And when you have light coming from the back and you get reflections, you're going to get things like this. You get this reflection of the wall. There's this is actually a reflection of all this bright stuff. So we're looking at backlighting, we're looking at reflections, we're looking at practicals, and we're looking at silhouette. If you remembered what those were, because I just forgot, that's good. And I said there was 5, but I made that number up at the beginning of this. What else could I say about this? I would say depth. So we have something that's in the foreground here, and it's blurry because of the motion blur. Then we have something that's kind of like middle ground, which is these people, and then this is deep in the background. So we have 3 layers of depth here. So those are my 5 things about cinematography that if you start to practice these and you look for them, they are everywhere. This is also very traditionally on the third. This is almost like a virtual, a concept artist drew this. So that is my breakdown of this. This is stuff that's actually taught to traditional 2D artists, and I don't know how many 3D artists get really taught this. I feel like I see a lot of bad 3D imagery, but if you practice this in 2D, in 3D, or in reality, you will get cinematic images. Now there's of course many other ways to do it, but if you look for these different things again, out in the world, you will see that a lot of I consider professional cinematic artists, they use these things quite a bit. And I would say for depth here, the atmospheric perspective is part of depth. So I'll try to formalize this and clean it up. But those are the things that I look for and you should start to see. And when I'm building things in 3D where things are all in Scratch, it's like, well, how do I make this cinematic? Those are the things that that really resonate with me. And everyone probably has their own factors, but I would call these the cinematography database factors of being cinematic. So let's talk a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about real world sets, and then we're going to end by talking about the main Mars set, which is kind of like the meat, not the meat, but it's something. It's a cool lighting setup they did to get this, the main set. So that was just a random trailer shot. This is his main botany lab, and there's a bit of daylight coming through the top. And it's just a cool set because they have these LED practicals built in, and there's kind of like shower curtain diffusion all around it. So what's interesting about this set is that when you're in it, they use a lot of wide lens cinematography in this. So how do you get a little bit more depth out of it? 1, you're backlighting, and 2, they're kind of faking the depth because this visqueen plastic stuff blurs everything. So it almost makes it seem like there's more depth in the scene. I thought that was really clever. And practicals, again, very cool. He's not exactly silhouette, but if you do look at this dark side, if you look at the values of his silhouette, you try to keep a clean read of his body. And being able to, that's a big part of composition, is keeping a clean silhouette of the main character. if you want to be able to read what they're doing. If you're trying to obscure them, you can put something the same color or value behind him and obscure his silhouette. But if you're trying to make something clearly read to the audience, silhouette is almost number one with lighting and composition. Next here's more of a silhouette. So let's look at those 5 elements again. Silhouette. I would say that these are practicals. I would say that the depth is somewhat faked by this blurriness here. Reflections, there's reflections in these from the backlights. What else did we say was depth? What was S? I forget. Backlight, reflections, practicals, we did that. What was S? S was the first one. I gotta look at this again. What was S? Oh, silhouette. Yeah, and silhouette. So we have all of them here. So those things are all present in this frame. And those are the things about cinematography that I think are pretty engaging, and I think you see them a lot. Here's the same set again, and I just wanted to point out here that there's a Chapman dolly with a slider, 120 cartoni, just a gigantic camera rig. Focus puller has a scarf on. It's awesome. And a butt shot of Matt Damon. So there you go. Here is a cool shot in the office, and we're going to look at the lighting in 2 seconds about this. I think this was like a cool, if I was designing a focus puller video game, which I've considered, and a Technocrane video game, I've already built a couple of them in Unreal. They're kind of fun. You kind of control the Technocrane with controllers. You guys want that? Maybe I'll make it. So there's 2 cameras here. This is like a cool, like I said, first person view of a focus puller. This is what it's like to hold the Preston and have the Cinetape readout here, though he's not getting too much useful info today. The lighting of this office scene is pretty cool. I guarantee you those 5 things that I talked about before about being cinematic, they're here in this scene. Natural backlight, reflections on the floor. You can see some of these practicals happening. Those 5 elements, they're there, and they're good. Being lit, pretty cool. I forget what make this is, but these are LED light mats, essentially. I know light mats, like technically the source maker ones, but they're just really thin mats of LED, and they're hung directly over them. And that's how the scene's being lit, and very realistically. And again, multiple cameras, one on the slider, one just over here on a regular old either 2575D or 120X. Cool scene. Lit realistically, but the 5 elements of cinematography, I think, are there. And then same in this scene, that's kind of what I'm looking at in these real sets. What are we looking for in a real set? We want depth. We want silhouette. He is definitely being silhouette against whatever frame is back there. And there's practicals. Having practicals in the background pretty much ensures that you're backlighting. If there's a practical in the frame that you can see that light, that practical is putting light back towards you, you're backlighting. The floor is shiny, so if you ever saw the floor, there would be reflections. Man, I nailed it, man. I think that's it. I think I'm pretty happy with those. I'm going to have to write like a book on those 5 things of cinematography. So here's our last bit. I hope you guys are still into this episode. Here's the main green screen set for like 90% of the movie happened on this part where like there's the base camp and he's outside walking around. Let's talk about the lighting here, and let's talk about what's going on in the shoot. So a lot of green screen, 180 green screen. This has been published out there. So Cineo, if you're looking to retweet something, this is it. These are all Cineos, man. That's why I was psyched to see them on the there's a car alarm going off. That's why I was psyched to see them on the last breakdown for Google ATAP Cineos. I guess that's the way now. Everyone's trying to be cool and use the Cineos. I'm into it. They're so bright. They're dimmable. They're powerful. That's awesome. So what else can we look at here in this frame? Here's our big old Libra. Here's how he's lighting it. 4x4 ultra bounce, which is something they only have in LA. I don't get 4x4 ultra bounces in New York. So someone go make those, I guess. And here's our Libra operator. Is that the operator? Maybe, I can't tell, but this is definitely the operating wheels for it. Pan, tilt, roll, those handles. Pretty cool. And then we have this big green screen, and we have a space balloon up here. So we'll look at that in a sec, right? Yeah. So what's the lighting happening here? It's tricky to see, but there's essentially a big sun source always coming this way. That's this hard light here. And then a lot of the passive is just coming from this big bleached muslin curtain that can be brought anywhere in the room. So it's going to bounce a natural amount of light back towards him. This is bouncing back as well. And then lit by cineos. Now, there's no space balloon on this one, but we will look at some space balloon lighting in a bit. And also using space balloons in Cinedesigner is a lot of fun because I don't get to use a lot of space balloons, but virtually I can have 100 space balloons. It's cool stuff. Red camera, 5K, 48 frames per second, 1280 for the ISO. Interesting. That's it. Pretty cool. Green screen. A lot of green screen. Moving on. This is a funny scene. I'm going to model these dollies pretty soon. Leonard Chapman, I see you guys on Instagram. I am going to model all of your dollies. I'm modeling all of them. I think this is the Hustler. I'm not as familiar with them. I'm not in LA and I'm not in the EU, so I don't use a ton of Chapman stuff, though I know a lot of people love it. 2 cameras rolling at the same time. Taller one, typically the close-up, doing like this shot. And the lower camera in an A-B situation, usually the wide shot. That's typically how that works. We could look at some of those demos in Cinedesigner. Eventually, when I do my tutorials and my breakdowns in Cinedesigner, you'll see why the wider shot's usually lower. Just usually is. Just makes more sense that way. And for the remainder of this, we're going to do some before and afters. So here's a before, and let's talk about the cinematography of it. So here's our big light source, specular highlight of the sun. Looks pretty good in his helmet. That's what's being chosen, and we also have our horizon fairly low. So we're looking up at Matt Damon. This is towards the end of the movie. He's looking quite heroic. He's above the horizon. As far as shapes that are occluding his silhouette. Silhouette's pretty clean. We have some buildings back here. He's against the sky. We're looking up at him. It's like a good scene. It's a feel-good scene. That's usually what's going on with the composition. Let's look at the plate. Cineo. Lots of cineos. Likely a 20K or an 18K. Oh, maybe it's an 18K. They probably used HMIs. 18K HMI, I bet. Hitting them. Also hitting the background at the same time. It looks like it. You ideally want one single shadow. We'll have to talk about single shadows on another episode. But that's what's going on here. Cool stuff. Moving on. Here is a behind-the-scenes shot where we have our space balloon on. And it is emitting light this way. So it is what's lighting up this, lighting up here, lighting up there. Here's Mark. And look at the exposures a little bit down. It's also backlighting. So even virtually on our plate, a lot of the things that I talked about are present as far as being the 5 elements of cinematography: practicals, backlight, not so much the reflections, depth with some foreground rocks, foreground, middle ground, background. It's usually there. And the practicals, man, they really sell it for me. Here's the final plate. In post, you can see that quite a bit was added. And, I suppose this is, the moon is up here. So that's what's doing this moonlight. And for those that want to get technical, I've heard a couple, how do you do moonlight? Moonlight is hard. Moonlight is just as hard as the sun because it's essentially the sun reflected off the moon, and that's really far away usually. And also it is blue. It's daylight. The moonlight is 5600 or cooler. So that is empirically what moonlight looks like. Now cameras these days could actually expose moonlight like this, but before, moonlight's usually fairly below street level, so you would never actually see moonlight, because it's getting overpowered by streetlights. But these days you could probably go shoot a movie with moonlight. That needs to happen. I know there's been short films, but I've not seen a real movie shot with it that way. Here's some more fun breakdowns. Horizon's roughly there. He's having happy times because he's like, this is bad times. His space station just got blown up, but he's trying to make the best out of it. Essentially for the cinematography, you're choosing the light direction, and the composition. So the sun's coming from here. Here's the drop shadow, pretty opened up frame. Here's the plate of said shot. A lot of green screen, again, probably a big 18K, just boom, hitting them here. And a lot of the contrast levels are chosen in post-production because you're capturing pretty wide. You did commit to a sun angle, but a lot of the look is definitely post, definitely color correction and visual effects. Again, sun's coming from this direction. That's the main thing you're doing. This is an action figure shot where you have, I call it an action figure shot, where you have a almost perfect head to toe framing of the character, and he's walking this way, and horizon is roughly here. Here's the green screen version of it, guys. Essentially 118K, lighting most of it, and then maybe a little bit of ambient fill there. The rest, color correction, visual effects. This is a cool shot, a cool breakdown. We are very close to the end of this breakdown, and horizon here, backlighting, depth with characters here in the foreground, medium ground, depth with atmospheric perspective. You can see how dark light this is. Way less contrast in the background. That's how we're doing it. That's what makes things look good. Cineos in the background. That is a massive green screen. That's massive. How tall is that? Is that 40 feet? 60 feet? That's a lot of feet back there. That's really cool. And you'll see that they fly around this green screen from when they're doing up angles, so that, these cineo lights would be all back here. That makes this hard to cut out. That's no fun for the visual effects guys. And then here it is. I think this is our last one. Yeah. Here is another cool shot. This is the behind the scenes that's like everywhere. I think the horizon's like around here. A lot of stuff happening. So these reflectors or solar panels are kind of our practicals, full bright. Yet there's still some dark stuff back here. Foreground, not a ton of silhouette in this one. This is technically silhouetted here, so there's some silhouette stuff against the sky. This is being side lit, but the practicals do make it kind of feel backlit. And reflections, I guess that's technically a reflection, but I'm just telling you guys, if you go look for those 5 things I mentioned, I know it was not the best presentation of those things. I'm going to do a cleaner one later in different formats probably, but those are the things that I really love and look for in cinematography. So here is the green screen plate of that. And that, everyone, concludes our look at the cinematography of The Martian. DP Dariusz Wolski, virtual production supervisor Casey Schatz. So what did we talk about today? So we looked at, and I wasn't even planning on doing this, we kind of looked at the 5 things that I consistently see in cinematic images. And I use cinematic, we probably need to come up with a better term. I would almost just say like engage. It's almost like a human instinct. What draws you in instinctively. In a second, when you look at that image, you're like, I need to keep looking at this for a minute. Let me just keep looking. Okay. A lot of the times it's silhouette, reflections, backlight, practicals, and depth. Those are the things that are going to kind of keep you in the frame, keep you engaged. We also talked about virtual production. We talked about how important it is on a lot of projects, especially big ones like this, but even the project that you're doing, to just understand and master the mechanics of it. And I'm not saying that like you do that and then you do exactly that on set. I mean, they do that exactly because it's so much money, but for you would plan it so that you have a really good overall picture and visualization for yourself, the client, the director, your crew. You're all on the same page. Now, if you need to, it's, filmmaking is like jazz sometimes, like things go wrong, things change, you need to adapt. That's great. But I basically, if filmmaking is jazz, then cinematography design is the sheet music. And you want to have the sheet music all down. Everyone needs to know how many bars are in the measure. When does the saxophonist take a solo? When does the drummer take a solo? That's cine design. You want to get the framework there so that when you do have to have jazz, or you need to improv, it doesn't just all turn into mush, which I've been on a couple sets where things turn to mush, and that's honestly why I started doing cinematography design. So, Cine Designer for Cinema 4D, you want to do this. I was going to say, if you want to get into this, you should do this if you have $0 or you're a student, and this seems like it's too much for you, you're not quite sure yet. The trial for Cinema 4D, free. I forget how long it is. I think it's a full version. If you are a student or an educator, if you have a college email address or education email address, whatever that means, it's been a long time for me since I've been in college. Cinema 4D, completely free. Cinema 4D is completely free if you're a student. So the students out there, go get the free version, and then all you have to get is my plugin Cine Designer, which is not free. And I don't have different tiers of it yet, like pro, middle, beginner, student. I just don't have that yet. Eventually, maybe I will make different levels for people to get into it, but I've priced it where I consider it incredibly fair for professionals, like incredibly fair. If you are a professional DP and you want to start using this, in a few months, when you get good at this and you start using this for your job, you will see a return on that value of like 100 times. I mean, it's and especially for the rest of your career, if you continue to use these type of tools, I believe it'll make you plan better and it's going to make you shoot better. For students, how much do you pay for your courses? How much is if you bought like a 50mm lens for your camera, even if it was an SLR lens? Costs a couple $100s. This is an investment in your learning where you can basically keep learning cinematography, keep practicing cinematography on your own as much as you want. As much as you put in, you get out. I also believe you'll see an insane return on value. So April 4th, Cinedesigner does come out. I'm really excited to get that out there. I think there's enough in there to get people started. If you've seen some of my past Maya stuff, I had a lot of stuff. This is a pretty slim package compared to that, though I think it's enough for most people to get started. You can visualize quite a bit with it. Just know that I'm going to be adding to it. So Cinedesigner Release 1, so I'm doing like release versions like Cinema 4D does. Cinema 4D is on Cinema 4D Release 17, so R17, I'm going to do that with Cinedesigner. Cinedesigner R1, I'm not going to do 1.1, I'm going to do R1 and then different builds. I'm going to add new stuff to it. I'm developing a way for a community to be able to give me feedback, show me what you're making, what are the problems. It's me developing it. I'm on YouTube every week. I'm going to be on YouTube almost every day, if not daily, teaching it. If you have issues, if you have problems, I'm not a faceless corporation. Just let me know. You know, be nice about it. Let me know. Like you're like, hey Matt, I wish you could change this slider setting, or this doesn't feel realistic. Just let me know. My goal is to make this as good as possible for myself, and as good as possible for you, the community of cinematographers that would benefit from using the system. So that is going to wrap it up for this episode. I know it's a bit long, but there was a lot to get through. Cinedesigner, April 4th at the cinematographydb.com online shop. This is Cinematography Database Show. I'll see you guys on the next episode.